Thank you. Thanks, Henry. Thanks a lot. I don't know if this is going to be all right for you, but I'm going to stand in the middle. So hi, I'm Dave. I work for Microsoft, and I have a comedy job title because I am, check me out, Microsoft UK's Chief Envisioning Officer. Yeah, right. Thank you. Job titles are really important at Microsoft. That's why I invented mine. Because I have a really special job for Microsoft. I work for a company that you all well know loves to talk to all of you about the technology and the products that we make. We love that shit. But what we don't do enough is not talk about the technology, but talk about the human beings that use it. And my job essentially is to project out into the future, because I think if we want to understand the kind of technology we're going to need, we need to know how do we think human beings are going to want to live, work, and play in the future. And if we understand that, then we can be a lot more mindful about the kind of technology they require. So then understand at a certain level, my job is essentially about the future of humanity. And I just figured if I'm going to have a job that's about the future of humanity, I deserve, nay, I demand a job title with a certain degree of pomposity. I think you'll see I've achieved that. I'm very proud of that. What I thought I'd do with today's session was basically, I've got about 30 minutes of slides, and then I'd really love to hear from you about your relationship with technology, how we help us all rise above the digital deluge. If you have questions as we go through, that's absolutely fine. We can work through. But let me give you a bit of the positioning to start with. So first of all, I need to position who the hell I am. You kind of know who I am and who I work for. But my story is I've spent the last 25 years working in the IT industry. Everything I've done in my career has been about IT. I have chosen to work for one of the world's largest technology companies. I've gone to the extremes of personal grooming to grow a beard and a ponytail. That's how committed I am to my industry. And guess what? I also quite like Star Trek, man. This is my 8th birthday party. It's my mum and my Auntie Mabel. Stick with me, I'll make it relevant, right? When I was a kid, right, I was young, naive, and gullible, and Star Trek taught me this really important lesson that technology is supposed to be a force for good in our society. It's supposed to be this thing that enables human beings to rise up and achieve more than they could do on their own. That's the point of technology. It's why I signed up for a career in IT. It's why I chose to work for Microsoft. But my problem is those 25 bloody years in IT. Because I look around at how we all use technology today, and I do not see this liberating force. I see a prison. I see something that constrains how we work, controls how we think. And quite frankly, I refuse to accept that as our future. So a few years ago, me and this guy over here, Nick, wait, say hello, Nick, there we go. We basically set out on a very different journey because we were charged with writing case studies for our industry. And case studies are lovely and an important part of your marketing arsenal. If you're a startup, you know how important they are. But they're essentially love letters to yourself. You're telling the world how great your technology is. They don't really focus on what the technology enables. And so we wanted to tell that different story. So 3 years ago, I read a book called Business Reimagined, which is about how the way we work today doesn't work. I'll come back to that in a minute. But the story I really want to focus on is the book that's out now, which is about the rise of the humans. And this is about how we change our relationship with technology to unleash its potential. But it starts here. It starts here in a world where technology is no longer something special. Now, one of the questions I ask every audience I speak to, and this will be a bit difficult here given the context of the audience, but it should still work, is could you put your hand up if you have a computer at home? Keep your hand up if the one you have at home is better than the one you use at work or at college. Now, admittedly, it's the same one, right? What do you think happens when I ask that question to people who are outside in the world of work? Everybody has a better experience of technology in their personal life than they do in their professional life. So, especially if you talk to a public sector audience, it's brilliant asking that question. It's kind of like shooting fish in a barrel at that point, right? But we forget that in IT. We still think IT is something special. We've got IT, we've got grandparents Skyping their grandkids. You know what it's like. You live online, you play online, you shop online, and that's your experience of technology. That's a rich personal experience of technology. Everybody's doing the same as you, but then they go to work, and this is how they feel when they go to work. Because they're greeted at the door by some long-haired, beardy git like me in IT who just likes to say, nah, you can't do that. It's not against standards. It's not secure. And all of a sudden, technology goes from this liberating thing to a constraint. And the bizarre thing about this is I've spent 25 years chasing people down corridors, trying to get them to care about what technology might do for them in their business. These days, thanks to consumerization, that chase still happens, but it's the other way around. People want more from technology at work, but we're preventing them from doing it. And we have to change that. The big issue that is underneath all of this, though, is the issue of productivity. And this is a bit weird because I would argue one of the biggest challenges facing organizations today is the very thing that's supposed to save us all, productivity. But the problem with productivity is kind of in two dimensions. I don't know if any of you followed one of the narratives from the general election last week was actually the UK's productivity problem. The UK is now less productive than it has ever been. Our growth in productivity is at its lowest ever level since the end of the Second World War. Against our G7 colleagues, the countries in the G7, we are second from bottom when it comes to productivity. We suck at productivity. But the real issue about productivity is not productivity itself, it's our definition of productivity. Because we define productivity today as a macroeconomic term. It's the output per unit of input. And the problem is when you have lots of people in work, they're not making more things. So actually we have lots of people doing the same amount of work than we had when there were more people unemployed. So we're not making enough quickly enough. And when our focus is all on productivity, our focus becomes on the process of work, not actually the outcome of work. Because the history of productivity is it existed as a concept for hundreds of years. Back in medieval times, productivity was about the magic of creation. If you were a farmer or an artisan, you would be making or growing stuff that you would sell and market. And productivity was all about that. It was about creating, the magic of creation. And then the Industrial Revolution comes along, and productivity is no longer about the magic of creation. It's about process, output per unit of input. And all of a sudden, our focus fixates on the process of work, not the outcome of work. We did a study last year, and we asked UK employees about what was productive for them. What did they feel productivity meant to them? 77% of the UK workforce thinks a productive day at work is clearing their inbox. And I find that terrifying, right? When did email become the outcome of work? Email is a process of work, and yet we've got this massive issue about how we perceive it. But then the other problem with productivity is our approach to productivity as an economy, as a society. Because when that Industrial Revolution came along and we decided that this was about process rather than outcome, what we also decided it would be much better to get organizations to basically break up what they make into a series of standardized interlinked processes that we'd get the individuals to do and become very good at. And basically, it's breaking up the process of work. But when you create a series of standardized interlinked processes to create the outcome, two really interesting things happen. So let me give you an example. Let's say I work for a manufacturing company, right? And I'm there on a production line, and you're paying me to make widgets, right? Why this is the gesture for making widgets, I don't know. I've never made a widget, but I'm sure if I did make a widget, this would be involved, right? So my salary is based on the quality of the widgets made, not whether the car's any good. So actually, you've separated me from the outcome of work. I don't give a stuff whether the car's any good. As long as my widget's the best damn widgets this company's ever seen, I'm okay. And secondly, when you create an organization that's based on these interlinked standardized processes, you create this rigid sclerotic infrastructure that will resist change. So when the market changes, when you hit a recession or a boom, or you decide you want to stop making cars and start making aeroplanes, the only way forward is for you to completely break up your organization before you can put it back together again to respond to the new change. So our focus on the process of work is the thing that is preventing us from becoming more productive. But there's more to productivity than just the process. What there is also is this concept of the deluge. We live in a world of too much information. We walk around complaining about having too much. Oh, there's so much out there, man. There's too much. But actually, and we argue about it like it's a new thing, but I would say that, that having access to too much information is not new. I would argue that since the invention of the printing press, our society's had access to more content than any single individual could consume in their entire lifetime. The fact that today, thanks to the internet, there's 10 times more, a bazillion times more, it doesn't matter. We've still got more. But what really makes it problematic, what really makes it special and an issue today, is these bloody things. These beautiful, wonderful, personal, engaging devices mean that from the very minute we wake up until the moment we go to sleep, we are surrounded by too much information wherever we are, whatever we do. Now, be honest. Humour me. Who amongst you, first thing you did this morning, check your phone. Last thing at night. More or less, all of us. And this is the challenge. Because it's the way that we relate to technology that's preventing success, because we still live in this place. Right, a quick random sample, and again, be interesting with this audience. Who amongst you does not get enough email? I don't even have to write a punchline to that joke. We get the pain. This was not the point, right, what we set out to do. And this is this thing called a productivity paradox, especially when it comes to technology. And the productivity paradox is essentially this. Back in the 80s, we debated the productivity paradox because IT was something new and we hadn't really fully committed to it as a society. But we come back into the productivity paradox again today because we're using technology to replicate old ways of working. And this is where the problem starts, because we can't be more productive if we're hindered, if we're constrained to old ways of working. Let's use email as the classic easy example, right? Email is just the digitization of an old process we had, an old analog process we had called office memos. In the old days, before technology arrived, if I wanted to communicate inside an organization, I would go to the stationery cupboard, I would grab a piece of paper, I would scratch out your name, scratch out my name, scratch out a message and shove it in an envelope, it would get sent off to you. What do we do with that analog process? Well, we turned up. The genius is in IT, right? We took that process, we digitized it, we made it fast, we made it efficient, we made it cheap. We never once said for a moment, is there a different way to communicate? Maybe we shouldn't communicate like this at all. Maybe there are other things we could do. We just took what we had and we took it into the digital world. Now, this is the thing that constrains us, because as we get further into this, we'll see that most of the problems we face is actually our really old-fashioned working practices. Most of the ways that we work, most of the processes, even the structure, the organization of the world of work is based on principles from Victorian times, sometimes even further. So we're working like we used to in Victorian times. We're just using the technology to make it happen quicker. Think about how stupid that is. So many of the working practices we have were invented in a world before technology, or technology as we define it today, exists. Surely there has to be different ways of working. Technology is supposed to provide an option to work in a different way rather than to replicate the old ways of working. And until we start to break away from that, we're never going to get free. We're never going to get to a place where we can actually work smarter. Work smarter is the mantra that you'll hear all the time. People say, we should work smarter. You cannot work smarter in a world where technology constrains what you do, where the process of work gets in the way, where the culture of work disengages individuals from moving forward. So what we have to do is we have to change. We have to see technology as a transformational thing rather than an iterative thing. Technology is the thing that enables us to work differently. Now, the brilliant thing about this is actually we've just got it all the wrong way round. We're thinking about this in the wrong way. We're looking at the process of work rather than the outcome of work. But there are some technologies coming, some of which you've already talked about over the last couple of days. We'll talk some more about them that completely change the game. So the first is data. So how many of you have talked, were part of the big data discussion or understand the big data discussion that happened here yesterday? Data changes things. Data will be the fuel for our future. The more data we have, the more we'll be able to do, the more insight we'll get. And data's fueled by one of the most important technologies that anybody on the planet is working on right now, and it's this thing called machine learning. Machine learning is how the algorithms are made, statistical-based pattern recognition. You'll remember the first time you were aware that you were using something like this, because I would bet it would be the first time that you were typing in a query into a search engine, and the search engine auto-completed before you'd finished. And if you were like me, you were like, that was a bit weird. I'm looking over my shoulder, seeing who's looking, right? What's going on? Statistical-based pattern recognition. So basically, all the search engine's doing is based on the characters you've just typed in and against the billions of other queries that have been typed into me this morning, the statistical probability of you going on to complete the sentence is like 99%, so I'm going to suggest that as the next option. That basic ability to spot patterns in data will transform our lives, transform our relationship with technology. It's my favorite example of this happening today. So we have now available in public beta the power of machine learning to provide real-time speech-to-speech language translation. It's available for you all to try at home. And we demonstrated it last summer. We do it via Skype. It's actually powered by our search engine Bing. Basically, when we demonstrated it, we had a gentleman speaking German connected to a lady speaking English via Skype. Gentleman speaks German, lady hears English. Lady speaks English, gentleman hears German. Real time. No human being involved, just an algorithm doing some pretty hairy work spotting patterns in data. Think about the transformational capability of that kind of technology. This changes our society. Because I think about stuff like this. I've got a 9-year-old son. Right? On the basis of this technology, do I bother to get him to learn a foreign language at school? Chances are, by the time he enters his world of work, it will be a redundant skill. Now, I get that's provocative. I get there are lots of reasons we learn foreign languages, but this stuff changes things. And our job as humans is we better figure out what our role is in this. How do we use the technology to lift our capability if we're going to get to the place where we really deliver the benefit that it has on offer? If you want to know how this works, this came from an email that did the rounds in 2003. It's a great demonstration of basically how machine learning works. And basically it says, if you speak English, as long as I keep the first and last characters of a word in the right place, I can actually mix up all the other characters. I can even misspell words, and you'll still be able to read the text. This is just how machine learning works. Can you guys read that? The way this works, the reason I love this example is it's completely contradictory to the way that we're taught language at school. Because when we're at school, we're taught that language is logical. We're taught that language follows rules. We're taught things like I before E except after C. But what they don't teach us at school is that there are 923 exceptions to the I before E rule. There are more exceptions to the I before E rule than there are to the bloody rule itself. Language, let me tell you, is not logical. Language does not follow rules, it follows patterns. And you know this innately as human beings because you create and curate and tend to your own pattern of language from the day you learn to read until the day you die. Every time you read something, you are improving your own personal pattern of language. And what happens when the brain gets presented with something as ambiguous as this, it doesn't call on the rules, it doesn't call on the logic, it calls on your pattern of language, and it uses your pattern to reassemble the words so you can understand them. And the other thing I love about this example is it also shows you the limitation of machine learning, because the algorithms are only as good as the patterns that they're provided with. What do you think happens when I show this to someone who's just beginning to learn to speak English? Or maybe if I'd shown this to my son a few years ago when he was just forming his own language skills. They haven't got enough of the pattern. So they can't actually read it. They can't make sense of it. And that's why our role as human beings is going to be around for a long while, because we have to create the patterns. We have to teach the algorithms. We have to connect the algorithms. But the biggest challenge that will be presented by all of this is actually our move away from the way we use data. Today we use data in a reflective way. You will run a project or an experiment or a campaign, whatever it might be. And during the process of that, you will generate a whole bunch of data. And when the thing's finished, when you come to the end of your campaign or your project, you'll look at the data and you'll use the data to reflect on what happened. And you'll say, oh, the data supports that this happened or that happened. Data is being used in a reflective way. What a world of big data opens up for us is to move away from a world of reflection into a world of prediction. Not half-baked down the pub on a Saturday afternoon prediction, who's going to win the 320 at Chepstow. I'm talking proper, scientific, accurate prediction. We've been doing it at Microsoft for the last 18 months. We did it last year with the World Cup. We got 15 out of 16 World Cup games right. We did the Scottish referendum in the UK. We got that right to within 2% of the public vote. We're a consumer company. We do X Factor. We do Pop Idol. And guess what? We're even doing the Eurovision Song Contest. The UK entry is actually 1,000 to 1, according to us. So you heard it here first. How would you run your organizations or your projects in a world where you accurately, almost, resolutely know what will happen? It fundamentally changes what we're going to do. Think about it when it comes to medicine. You know actually what will happen to patients when they will hit certain circumstances. Fundamentally changes what we do. There are other examples showing how this challenges us as a society. What happens in a world where I can accurately predict your future location? So all of this is coming. There was a study done a few years ago now in the US. They took the cell phone usage records, 50,000 people, a period of 3 months. Every call they made, the duration of the call, the location of the call, who they called. They brought it together with some smart maths, and they could predict the future location of those individuals with only 93% confidence. Only 9 times out of 10 were they right. Think about your own lives. What would it mean to you if somebody could predict where you're going to be next week? What advert to serve you? This is the world that we're moving into, and we have to get this right. We have to understand what's going on. What's driving this is basically a Copernican shift in technology. And for me, if you remember Copernicus in 1534, he rocks up to his academic buddies. He says, you guys, you got it all wrong, right? It's not the sun that goes around the earth, it's the earth that goes around the sun. And in that instant, thousands of years of science, everything we knew about the world around us gets turned on its head. The same thing's happening with technology, because today we gravitate around technology. If you want to use technology, you have to pick up your phone, you have to sit in front of your TV, you have to sit down by your computer. We gravitate around the technology. We're moving into a world where the technology will surround us, a world of ubiquitous computing. Every floor tile, every surface, every light bulb is a device that is connected and spewing out data about the world around us. What happens in a world where the floor tiles know not just how many times I've stood on them, or how many times they've been stood on, but how many times I've stood on them versus how many times Nick stood on them. And if you add to this world of ubiquitous computing a layer of ambient intelligence, so algorithms working proactively on our behalf, you end up in a really, really exciting space. This is a world that actually starts to predict what's going on, but also connects the experience to the individuals. It's already started. If you've got an Apple device, if you've got an Android device, if you've got a Windows phone, you're using the first generation of ambient intelligent assistants. So if you've got iOS, you'll be using Apple's Siri, which is powered by Microsoft's Bing. If you've got Android, you've got Google Now. If you've got Windows Phone, you've got our Cortana. And these are intelligent assistants that hoover up the data of the world around us and start to bring that to our assistants, start to do it proactively. Cortana today, for example, knows my location. She also knows where I'm going to be next because it's in my calendar. And seeing that those two locations are geographically separated, she'll start to monitor the traffic outside. And if the traffic builds up, she'll interrupt. She'll say, hey, Dave, you need to leave early because the traffic's building up. So again, what she's doing, she's hoovering up the data that exists based on some knowledge that she has about me and using that to give me a service. What happens when she's reading my emails? She sees that I'm presenting at the Silicon Valley Comes to Oxford event. She knows who I am. She knows who the other speakers are because it's on the agenda. She knows who some of you are. She starts to curate a bunch of information to give me insight about what I should be talking about, who I should be talking to. This is where we're going. And to see this play out, we've got a project that's come from our research labs. And you know it's come from our research labs because it has a project that you would only find, a project name that you would only find in a research lab. This is a project called Situational Interaction, Mark III, right? And this is a world of the connected experience. This is a world of ubiquitous computing and ambient intelligence. And I'll let the video play, and I'll just narrate it. All we have here is a lab. And the lab's equipped with a whole series of sensors. In this particular case, it's got cameras. And so we can see that there are two blokes walking towards the elevator. But more specifically, it's not just two blokes walking towards the elevator. I know exactly who those two blokes are because I've got a camera, I'm looking at their face. And knowing who those two blokes are means I can then go and look at their calendar. I know that they're going to meeting room 5.13, which is on the 5th floor. They don't even have to press a button because they're walking the elevator knows it's there. As they then walk around the environment, they can see what's going on. They're connected and the environment is aware of them. It delivers a different experience. Let me play out this example in a different way while the video goes on. Think about digital out-of-home advertising, right? We're used to this thing where we walk past billboards. It's the same advert being shown to thousands of people, whether it's relevant or not. Think about what this means for out-of-home advertising. Just phenomenal. How many of you work in London or sort of travel in London to go? Some of you? Well, so I work in London. I have this little hobby in London. It's called the Tube Shuffle. And the Tube Shuffle is what you do when you're traveling to a destination in London where you know roughly where you need to be, so you're at the right tube station, but you don't know specifically where you need to be. You have no idea once you emerge from the tube where you've got to go. So what do you do in that situation? Well, you stuff your hand in your pocket, type in the postcode of the place you're trying to get to, and then you spend the next 5 minutes down like this, walking through the streets. So like, this is the Tube Shuffle, right? Oh shit, it's this way. No, it's this way, this way. And I'm like bumping into people, stepping in dog poo, all this sort of stuff, because my gaze is right down here. In this kind of world, the experience changes, because as I walk out the tube station and start walking down the street, the first digital billboard I pass knows it's me, knows where I'm going, knows the context that I'm in, serves me an ad that is relevant to that context, and crucially, at the bottom of the ad, there's a little green arrow that says, Dave, you're on the right track. The place you're going to is just down here 2 minutes along the road. This is a world of ubiquitous computing and ambient intelligence. Now, there's lots of challenges that we have to address in doing that, privacy being one of the big ones, but this is the kind of capability that we're building, the kind of options that will be available if we want to do this and go forward. First thing we've got to deal with is how this changes jobs. We're not going to move into a world where the robots do all the heavy lifting and the algorithms answer our email and we sit on our fat backsides and do nothing for the rest of our lives. Not on my watch. The capability of technology is to lift us. It lifts human capability. If the algorithms answer our email, then I have a bunch more time than I didn't used to have, that I can now do something else at work. I can use the opportunity to do things differently. We have to raise our expectations for what makes technology possible, or what technology makes possible in our lives. We have to break free of those Victorian values about what work means to us, about how technology enables us. Kids are brilliant at this because they have no expectations. They have no past experiences that colour their views. My son was fantastic when he was 5 years old, and I was doing an interview for Channel 4 News on voice recognition technology. And we'd just launched the Connect in the UK. And I'm sitting at home, it's the night before the interview, I'm doing all of my research, right? So I'm with my son, we're playing on the Xbox, fantastic, right? 30 minutes in, he's like barking commands at the telly, Xbox, play this game, Xbox, play DVD. 30 minutes later, he stops. He runs off into my kitchen. I had this little voice come out from the kitchen. Microwave, make my tea. Followed by a, Dad, the microwave's broken. Because he, at 5 years old, had basically thought, hang on a minute, if I can control a TV with my voice, there must be other things in the world I can control with my voice. Fantastic. Mum, make it. No, that didn't work at all. But, because he's got no past expectation that is limiting his view. We have to remember a bit of that magic. When we start using new technology, we shouldn't be looking for reasons why it won't work, things that will stop it from working. Instead, we should spend a little bit of time at the beginning thinking, what if? What if it did work like this? And the lovely thing about what's happening in our personal lives now is we're actually quite engaged with technology. Every time you do something cool with technology in your personal life, it increases your aspiration. And many of you will go into your workplace the next day thinking, well, bloody hell, if it was so good doing that stuff in my personal time, why can't I have access to that inside the professional world, inside my world of work? But we have to push, we have to raise expectations. We also have to understand that if we want to be transformational, we can only be transformational if we have access to two things. Number one, you need to be in a place that has a culture that supports transformation. Basically, when we work with our customers, if they want to change the outcome for what they do, they have to understand that every single member of their organization needs to feel like they can make a difference. They have to be engaged, they have to be empowered to be transformational. And secondly, those people can only be transformational, assuming they've got the culture, if they have access to the tools that enable them to be transformational. And that means working in an entirely different way. It means using a whole different suite of tools. You will not be, I promise, no matter how hard you try, you will never, ever be transformational over email. Not even as an attachment. It won't happen. We've got to find a very different way to open up the engagement of our employees. And that's Microsoft's job. Some of you will have spotted the obvious paradox in what I'm talking about. Here I am talking to you about the future of productivity, how we need to change things, and some of you will be saying, hang on a minute, aren't you the buggers that have been delivering this stuff for the last 30 years? The way that we work in offices today with technology is pretty much down to you. Well, do you know what? That's right. And 30 years ago, when we didn't have technology at work, we needed the stuff that we have today. But now we're at a point where everybody uses it, where everybody gets it. And our job as an organization, we have to reinvent productivity. We need to show you what the technology enables, how it enables us to work differently. That's Microsoft's mission. Our mission is to actually help every man, woman, and child on the planet and the organizations they belong to achieve more from their lives. Use more technology, but actually get more stuff done. That's our job. And the basis that we think that we're going to do that is we create visions of the future. And this is my favorite. We've just done this recently. It was launched about a month ago, where our job is to paint a picture of how life will look like in the future. Now, these aren't product promises. These aren't things. We're not going to make this stuff explicitly. But we basically get a bunch of really smart researchers, smart individuals together to paint a picture of how we might work. The lovely thing about the video I'm about to show you is that the guys who put the video together, they have one design principle. It's the only thing that guides their work, is we cannot showcase technology unless it already exists in our labs as a research project somewhere. So we can't just make stuff up. We have to show you stuff that is steeped in some level of reality. It will evolve slowly over time, may not be exactly as you see it, but actually this is the stuff that we're working on. And I want to play this video just to give you a context about how different we think the world of work is going to be if we can make the change happen. Now, I love that video, not because it's all whizzy and it makes us look really cool, but because it drives a conversation. It's a conversation I want to have with you and I want you to have with people around you, which is about if the technology is going to play out like that, if the technology is going to become transparent in our lives, is the thing that we don't sit and focus on anymore, but we focus on the task. It connects people in different ways. How on earth are we going to change our behavior in order to be ready for that kind of technology? How are we going to change to live up to the potential of what that does? How are we going to be ready for amazing innovations like a world of holograms? And holograms not behind some dorky headset, but actually projected into the world around us. We have in our labs, we have a working sort of equivalent of the Star Trek holodeck. I can walk into an environment. It's projected based on the context of what I'm doing. We can create three-dimensional interactive projections. I can pick up a projected image of a ball. I can throw it around the room. How are we going to use that stuff? How are we going to rise up? That's our challenge, and that's the conversation that we have to have. And really, to summarize, before we then open up to debate, you have to understand, this is not my view of the future. This is not the Terminator, and believe it or not, the internet is not Skynet. I have a really different view of the future, and it's down to all of us, and it's simply this. I want a world where we can stand high and tall, right up on the shoulders of the digital giants that we've created. We use technology as a gift for our society to extend our reach to achieve more than ever we could before. And the thing I love about this debate is we've been having it for a long, long time. When I was a kid and I was doing my maths exam, I was doing my maths O-level. And if you don't know what an O-level is, it's kind of like a GCSE, but harder, right? It was a point in our society where we were debating the role of pocket calculators in the education of our children. And as a result of that societal debate, I did my maths O-level with a logbook and a slide rule. Now, let me tell you, I'm a better mathematician with a calculator than I am with a tabulated bit of paper and a slidey bit of plastic. Yes, I need to know the basics of arithmetic, but once I do, the technology lifts my capability, extends my capability as a human being. It's exactly the same debate today. We have to stop focusing on the tools, stop teaching people how to use the tools like Word and PowerPoint and even specific coding languages, and instead make sure that every single member of our society is equipped with the basic skills. Critical thinking, deep thinking, the ability to collaborate, the ability to communicate, the ability to stay safe online. If we make sure that every member of society has access to those skills, then and only then can we as human beings rise up and achieve more. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. So then when it comes to questions, I'm open to any question about the presentation. I'm open to your questions that you might have about Microsoft, but I'm also interested in a dialogue about how real you see some of that stuff, or what your own challenges are with technology and being productive. Anybody want to start?
I'm just curious, you speak about your vision for the future being one which allows humanity to achieve more. And I'm wondering if you could define your specific vision of achievement.
So the interesting thing about achievement is we all have our own individual definition, right? What does it mean to me to achieve more? Well, it means I have a bunch of great time with my family, I do some amazing things at work, and I have enough time to fit everything in. That's my definition of achievement. Yours will be different. But it's about enabling people to make that choice. So if you think about today, we think about productivity in two dimensions. One, in the world of work, so we are not really that productive at work. And secondly, I would argue that most people have less free time in their personal life than at any other point in history. That can't be right. And so actually where I'm going is put the technology in the right place so it enables us to work in a different way, which then gives us different choices that we can make. So this isn't about giving people time back, it's about enabling them to make different choices that help them do the things that they want to do. So this concept of achievement, it's both an individual thing, it's also an organizational thing. What's important to the organization that you work for? That's trying to figure that out and then putting the technology in the right place to deliver it. Any more questions?
First of all, thanks for your talk. I'm wondering if you can comment a little more about augmented reality. I personally am interested in it. I think the future is just going to be either projections or whatever it is, just not the way we view things now.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's, other than the dorky goggles that Microsoft just came out with, is there anything else that you could do? How do you see the future? If you can just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm a big fan and believer in augmented reality. We're going to go through an ugly period where it is going to have to be about dorky headsets. You know, look at Microsoft's HoloLens, fantastic, groundbreaking product, dorky headset. We're not going to be in a society where we all sit in our, in lecture theatres or in our offices, in our open plan, with everybody wearing one of those things. I don't think sort of human beings want to feel like that. But actually, we are going to be certain cases where you're collaborating or doing some entertainment. If you've seen the Minecraft demo alone for that, do you know what I mean? It's just fantastic. But that's why I think that video is quite important, because what you saw in that video is our ultimate destination with holograms, which is the ability to project them wherever you are, whatever you're doing, without the dorky headset. And actually what we'll do with products like HoloLens, but also Oculus Rift and there are other products available, is they create the stepping stone. They create the new world that enables us to work in that different way. One of the things that actually I hadn't really thought enough about, but a recent demo that I saw of our products really made me think differently, was how we can use technology like holograms to augment dumb devices. So we had a demo where we had a maker robot, where it was basically a $500 robot that anybody can make. Its little brain is a Raspberry Pi, and it's great, but it's basic. But actually, things like HoloLens, they're kind of a two-way connection. So as much as I can use HoloLens to augment and create a user interface for that dumb robot, I can actually use the intelligence of HoloLens to tell the dumb robot where things are in the environment. So I could imagine a sort of production line where the workers are wearing things like HoloLens and are seeing all of the robots out there on the production line making work, but having all of this really beautiful visual imagery about what robot's doing what, which process, how to interact, taking away all of the coding. So in this example on this maker robot, you need to be able to make the robot do stuff. You've got a program in Python. Well, in the HoloLens world, actually, you've just got to be able to use a graphical user interface. So it opens up that world. So I think augmented reality is huge. The holograms is one thing. The other thing to think about is these bloody things, right? This is not a mobile communication tool, not in the traditional sense. I don't think this is a phone. I don't even think it's a smartphone. We don't use it in smart ways. But what this really is an augmented reality device. This is a window into the digital world. This enables me, wherever I am, whatever I'm doing, to reach into the digital world, get the best that the digital world has to offer, and use that to change my real world experience. And it starts in really basic ways. How many of you used your phone in a physical retail store to check the price, right? So that's the beginning where you do that. Oh, yeah, it's a bit cheaper on Amazon, so I'll buy it from home. Fine. How many of you used it to take a tour around a place like Oxford, where you're walking around and you've got the camera showing you where you are, but actually it's layering on a whole bunch of information? That whole concept to merge those two worlds is just crucial to where we're going. And so I think if you think about augmented reality in those two levels, what we can do today with things like this, then a world of holograms through dorky headsets into a world where we can project them anywhere, that kind of puts us in the right place. And that's kind of how it should be, right? This, to me, is the point of blurring the boundaries between digital and analog and lifting humans by using technology in new ways.
You can wait for the microphone. Okay, thanks for the talk. For man and machines to have humans and machines to have a symbiotic relationship, I suppose machines must have some long-term and intractable limitations vis-a-vis humans. In other words, there should be something we do better than machines, no matter how much they advance. I mean, people have different views about that. So what is your view? Do we have something that we can do forever better than machines? Because if not, I think you know what I mean.
I mean, forever's such a long time, right? I do know what you mean. And there's all this debate about the singularity. Like, so even if you look at a narrow domain, let's look at artificial intelligence. And singularity is the point at which the algorithms become self-aware. They can generate new algorithms. They can learn from each other. They can connect other. It's kind of like the Terminator scenario. And there's lots of debate. Some people think the average date for when singularity will occur is about 2040, right? But even then, I mean, it's such an interesting space. I think we sometimes are quite arrogant about how simple we think humans are in the human brain, but equally how we may also underestimate what technology is capable of. There's another interesting sort of principle in robotics. It's called the Moravec's paradox. And one of the things in robotics that's really intriguing to many people in that space is this thing where actually to do the stuff that we think is really hard, like the complicated mental cognitive stuff, dead easy for robots and algorithms to do. But to do the stuff that we as humans take for granted every day, which is fine motor control, the ability to move around our environment, pick stuff up and not squash it, really, really difficult for robots to do. And Moravec's paradox basically says that, it's the white-collar workers that will get displaced by a new wave of technology, but traditionally the blue-collar workers, the people with the skills who we've not valued as much, the plumbers, the chefs, the cleaners, they're less likely to be replaced in the short term by robots because it's really hard to replicate that kind of a capability. And so all of these things will play out forever. I think at some point we'll reach a really interesting point where the technology is at par or challenging us. I hope that we will do, and the lovely thing right now is we're thinking about that time and we're trying to put the right things in place to make sure that we don't end up with a Terminator scenario, but end up in a place where we can use the technology to lift our capability to even greater heights. This gentleman here, and then I'll come to you at the back.
What do you think the social context of all of this is? If I walk out of the subway and a billboard tells me where to go, I'm not asking someone directions. How is this future that you're sort of painting as being extremely bright? What's the effect on us as social beings?
Well, I hope it doesn't change. And I think one of the challenges, especially when you think about the future and stuff like this, is it's really easy to play it to extremes. And we come in contact with this all the time. Just because the computers can tell you the answers to this doesn't mean that you should stop talking to human beings. And equally, there are some things that we have to do today where I think technology does have a negative social impact on us because we don't talk enough. We'll sit in the pub with our friends and we'll be looking at our own Facebook status, not talking to the friends that are in front of us. And that's kind of what this second book was about. So our job now is to wake people up to where the technology can help and where it can't. I would argue one of the critical life skills in the 21st century is being able to make a conscious choice at any moment in time as to whether the technology can help what you're currently doing. Yes or no? And if it can, fantastic, pick it up and engage. If it can't, turn it off, put it down, leave it alone. And as long as we continue with that kind of mindful mindset, making the right choices, then technology should be delivering us great things. It should also connect us in different ways. One of the reasons why I love that story about, should I get my son to learn a foreign language is because it puts people's backs up. Right? You bloody idiot. Of course we're going to need a million reasons why we learn foreign languages. And I'm like, but you don't get the point. The point is that my son can emerge from school, and he may have done French or Spanish or whatever it is, but thanks to that technology, he'll also be able to talk another 150 languages as well as the 2 that he learned. And that means that he can go and work in China or wherever it may be, wherever he chooses to work, and be able to connect with that culture. He could have a rich cultural experience. And people, because they think in this binary way, they don't see that in the same level. So I think this opens up new doors. It still revolves around the human beings to choose to go through the right doors to do the right thing. And that's the biggest challenge I face with all of this. The biggest issue we face about getting technology in the right place, about getting more from technology, it's got nothing to do with the technology itself. It's got everything to do with what my dad calls the interface between the keyboard and the chair. It's us, right? It's our job. We have to do it as humans. We have to rise up to make those different choices.
Hi, my name is Nikhil. I'm an MBA student here. What you explained about what Microsoft will do in future might make a lot of sense for large companies. But for people who are starting up or have small companies, how do they know what level of technology intervention is good? Because when I'm starting up, I want to be focused on the idea and I want to spend all my effort on that and least amount on understanding or scaling up or implementing a lot of new technologies. So where can I get that input in terms of how much is good, how much of Microsoft now and in future is going to help me? How do I think about it?
I guess I don't see those two worlds as different, right? I mean, my theory for this stuff, if you spend time thinking about how to use the tool and not the task, we've probably got something wrong. And that's the same whether you're a one-man organization or 100,000 people. And where we're going is to make the technology a lot more accessible. This isn't about big enterprise implementations and all the enterprise architecture. It's the consumer cloud-based stuff that you already use today. You will self-select. You will find the technology that works for you because it's out there and it's available and you can pull it down. That's the world that Microsoft wants to be part of. And yes, we want to deliver subscription services and deliver it at scale as well as small. But remember our job, our mission, it used to be about a PC on everybody's desk. Now it is about how do we help everybody achieve more through a positive use of technology. And I think our job, whether you're a big organization, small organization, whether you're a consumer or in the world of work, it's the same principle for us. Now, we've got a legacy that we've got to move through. We've got new tools that we want to introduce you to, new ways of working that become possible as a result of those things. And that's where we need to engage.
Hi, my name is Parag. Thanks for this line of introducing this line of thinking. So when you say we don't need skills like MS Word and Excel and PPT, but we need to focus on more of core skills like critical thinking or communication. But when you talk about critical thinking, so don't you think this skill is also what we need right now, what we see we need right now, but like 20 years down the line, what we do as critical thinking right now is compared to pie charts and see where the revenue goes more up and where the costs are going more down, that's a good place to invest in. But this also can be told by an algorithm, and like that's also, we can empower these machines to tell us more. Like based on historical data, where do we invest more, and where is the best profit coming up? So even critical thinking, I think we can empower machines to do more than us.
You can, but I think, again, it's about lifting our capability. And your question sort of reminds me of a lovely story about Pablo Picasso, who was interviewed in the mid-60s for a French art magazine, bizarrely. And basically, he got asked this question, right, which was, what do you think of computers, Pablo? And remember, computers in mid-60s in France were very different to the computers we have today. But he had this brilliant answer, which I think captures my answer to you. Is he turns around to the journalist and basically says, computers are useless. All they can give you is answers. I need something that can ask the right questions. And if I were to really distill down the relationship of humans and technology, it's exactly that. Yes, the computers will provide the answers, but if we're asking them the wrong questions, they're not actually going to help us. And so our job is to evolve through critical thinking, evolve our data skills too, because in a world where the data becomes more accessible, more available, the tools become more powerful, we have to make sure that we're asking the right questions. And that's our job, again, is to put all of us in that right kind of place, to make sure our kids are getting those kinds of skills as they come out of school, as well as basic engineering and all that sort of stuff. But the ability to ask the right questions, I think, is crucial. Thank you. There's a lady in the middle there.
Thanks for your talk. The future that you've sort of envisaged and told us about seems almost plausible in the realm of current technology. However, once, like, say, deep artificial intelligence becomes a reality, maybe computers can actually take on these skills. You've sort of talked about how technology can just enable us, and that seems like a safe and reassuring story. But once artificial intelligence becomes a reality, that won't be the case anymore. Technology can actually move beyond us. And I'd like to know what you think about how Microsoft is going to basically harness the power of artificial intelligence. The second bit is this future within the realm of current technology seems to involve a lot of data. And I just wonder what Microsoft's stance is on data protection and data privacy.
Yeah, both great questions. So everybody is quite rightly worried about the rise of artificial intelligence. And, it was not a coincidence that people like Stephen Hawking and Bill Gates and Elon Musk were all talking recently about establishing a think tank, a working group, about what are the things that we need to do to prevent artificial intelligence from becoming out of control. And you have to understand that an approach that we would rather take is, if you like, it's one of naive optimism. Let's talk about the prize. Here's what artificial intelligence will enable us to do that will be better for our society. And if we like that, then let's talk about how we manage and deal with the situation to prevent the bad stuff from happening. And that's where I think we are as a company. I think that's where we are as a society with that debate. When it comes to data, data's absolutely crucial. And data's crucial in a number of different ways. First of all, privacy is massively, massively important. It's important to us as a company. It's important to me as an individual, and that we get data right and approach to privacy. But that doesn't mean to say that we have to deal with it in exactly the same way as we've always done. Privacy is particularly problematic because your definition of privacy as individuals will be different to mine. So it's not like companies like Microsoft and Google and Facebook can put out products with a straight line that says, right, anything above the line is public, everything below the line is private, because your lines are all different. What we have to do is empower you. We have to do it in a couple of ways. Number one, and this is Microsoft's philosophy, is we have to be open and transparent. If you give us your data, you need to be able to find out what's going to happen to that data. We need to be open and transparent and say, if you give us your data, here's what's going to happen. See those two people over there? We're going to hand the data to them, and they're going to serve you adverts or whatever it might be. And then when we're open and transparent, the second thing we have to do is we have to make the value exchange really explicit. So if you give us your data, here's what you'll get in return. And it might be a service, it might be whatever it might be. But then once we're open and transparent and you can really see the value that you're going to get, then you can make a decision whether you want to do it or not. Because I think the future for getting this right with privacy and data is all about trust. And you need to be able to trust us, and we need to earn the trust from you. And we're going to do that by being open and transparent, showing what becomes possible. The real issue around data is we need a new model when it comes to privacy. And we have an analog model that we use for privacy today. And that's not going to work in this world where we have lots of data and it's moving around and it's being used for different things. So we have to then work with the government, we have to work with regulators to come up with a definition for data regulation and privacy that is fit for purpose in the 21st century. And I think that's the debate that companies like Microsoft are driving, not alone, but we're working with the government in the UK in particular to do this. We're also doing it from the States to really come up with something that will get us where we need to be, maintain people's privacy, but deliver the incredible experiences that we've talked about.
Thank you. So I'd like to go back for a minute to the question of how do we make this happen? How do we kind of get to the video that you showed us? And you mentioned earlier that kind of some of the glasses that are coming out are perhaps a slightly awkward step on the way there. But I'd love to know a bit more about what you consider some of the key milestones and perhaps a little bit on how to make those happen.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the work we're doing at the moment is trying to get people to understand, A, why we should want, we're talking about reinventing productivity. That's a problem that nobody thinks is broken at the moment, but actually we need to show that it is. And then also we've got to show how people change. And when I say people, I mean individuals as well as organizations. And I think the journey is basically this. If we want to do more, either with our lives or with the organizations we work for, then we need to improve how productive we are. If we want to improve how productive we are, we actually need to change what we're doing. We need to do different things, different ways, in order to make that happen. I'll give you just a very brief example of how this has happened already in the UK. One very famous example is the DVLA, the Driver and Vehicle Licensing Agency in the UK. So for almost 100 years, it's been law in the UK to display a little coloured disc of paper in the front of your windscreen. If you drive in the UK, you'll know what this is. You pay your road fund licence and you stick a coloured piece of paper in there. Now, the DVLA, until recently, spent 7 million quid a year on printing those discs because they still believed it was a world where traffic wardens and policemen and women would be looking in the windscreens of millions of cars every day. But that's not true anymore. We have a digital solution. We have this thing called ANPR. Every time you drive into a petrol station or down the motorway, across a city boundary, a camera looks at your car license plate, checks it against a database in Swansea. And so the DVLA were faced with a dilemma. They had an old-fashioned process, which was the printing of these discs, cost them 7 million quid, and they had a new way of working, which was the digital opportunity. So what do? Well, they had the guts to say, do you know what? Let's just not print the discs. Why would we do our business like that? I get that we've done it for almost 100 years, but it's no longer relevant to how we work. So they transformed what they do as an organization to take advantage of a digital society. That same role other organizations need to take with what they do. So we talked about improving productivity. You improve productivity by changing the way you work for something that's relevant to a digital society. And then the third and final piece is the most important piece, is if you want to change and you want to succeed in change, especially as an organization, you can only do that if your employees are engaged. You can't just change because the employees won't change. If they're not involved, then they won't make the change happen. And employee engagement is probably, I would argue, the single biggest issue facing the world of work today. Terrible, terrible statistics. The US statistics are 71% of the US workforce is disengaged at work, not really that bothered. UK number is 69%. Disengagement in the UK alone costs the UK economy about 44 billion quid a year in lost productivity because the workers aren't that bothered. So if you want to be more productive, if you want to achieve more, you have to change what you do, but crucially, you have to engage employees to make that change happen. And that, for me, that's what we all need to figure out.
One last question, please.
Go on, there's two more. We'll do them quick.
Oh, yeah, I don't want to forget this. So I was just curious, where does Microsoft see itself as a business in this ubiquitous computing future? Does it see itself as a software as a service firm or as a technology consultancy firm? And the reason why I asked that is because my previous job, which was with Intel, is a company that sees this sort of ubiquitous future and has had great difficulties trying to transition from its two traditional businesses, PC and servers. So where do you think Microsoft will be?
I hope where Microsoft will be where they've always been, which is, at our heart, we're a platform company. And in the old days, that meant you bought our server software and our desktop operating system software. But platforms to me are bigger than that. We create the capability for you to do the things that are special to your organization or special to you as an individual. We're going through a lot of change right now to come out of that old world of IT, the world that Intel's come out of, away from a world of servers and infrastructure into a world of what we enable people to do to work differently. I'm quite hopeful that we're making the right kind of changes. If you look at some of the big philosophical changes in us in organisation over the last 12 months alone, you know, would you have thought that you would see us bring out a whole suite of our products for our competitors' platforms? The fact you can get Office on Android or iOS is not a coincidence. We see the world very different. It's no longer this closed ecosystem world that it used to be in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. Now it's all about the services that you use every day. So I think based on that, also based on the fact that we've been around almost, 40 years this July, puts us in a very special place. We've got a lot of, let's call it history, experience about what it takes to make this stuff happen at scale. We know things that work, we also know things that don't work. And I think, again, that puts us in a very different place as an organisation. So I think it's a very different world for us. We want to be underneath it. We want to be the platform that makes this stuff possible. And I also think, given our pedigree, where we've come from, we've got the ability to do that in a way that we can lift everybody rather than just small subsections of society. That's the plan. That's the goal. That's where the culture is changing inside the organisation to deliver that. You guys will be the judge as to whether that's successful in terms of the products that you consume, the services that you look after. Thank you. Last question.
So it actually goes back to what you were saying around teaching and mindful questioning. So I was reading a great book by Kevin Kelly called What Technology Wants. And he frames it quite simply where he says technology expands what's possible. And I think what's interesting is when you think about not just business schools, but general curriculum, it's starting to teach students to identify what's possible, but it's not necessarily doing a great job at challenging what we should actually do with that space.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested in if you had to design a program for a business school, how would you be teaching students to ask the right questions around what to do with that space of possibility?
That's a great question. And certainly I think a lot of the answer, when I can talk about employee engagement, for me there's a whole range around skills. And the skills that are really important to me are things like the growth mindset. It's a bit of a popular topic right now, but I think it's really important. So having the right kind of mindset to deal with those kinds of challenges. I think also having the right aptitude and attitude and being part of a culture that is where it's okay to ask questions and to try and improve things. And whether you want to call it growth hacking or fine, whatever. But those are the skills I think are going to be really crucial for everybody to have. We need to figure out how to harness them. I think the other skills that we really need to focus on is not so much the skills that we use to provide the machine of our organizations, the world of work, but it's the skills that we use to run those organizations. And I'm a big believer of this transition away from a world of management and into a world of leadership. And I mean true leadership, not the people at the top. I mean an organization where everybody is empowered to make a difference. Their job is to make other people successful. If you combine that kind of culture with the skills of the growth mindset and the ability to want to improve and transform, I think that's pretty powerful. And I think it puts you in a place where you're going to be able to deal with the kind of ambiguity I think the future's going to hold. We're going to have to move away from what are essentially Victorian values of that organisation where it's all about the hierarchy and into how we create groups that are self-fulfilling, self-driving in order to drive to the organisation's collective goal. It's a very different cultural approach, but I think, again, the whole point about technology is the democratization effect that it has, whether it's about knowledge or about the way we work, and I see that as an extension to that. That's a great question. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, can you join me in thanking Dave one more time?
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Alan.